The idea that that we have, the idea that they're gonna, the idea.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump held their first presidential debate of the United States election cycle in Atlanta, Georgia. While we won't get into who was more impressive and who had better rebuttals, we did notice one thing. President Biden's favorite catchphrase, the idea that.
What an idea.
And we counted the times he said this particular phrase. It was 26 times in the 90 minutes set for the televised debate. Let's listen in and count them.
The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. A doctor should be making those decisions. I'm not saying no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, it's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying. 4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. The idea that those people are patriots? Come on. The idea he's refusing to, will you denounce these guys? The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. The idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated, we saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th. For example, I provided for the idea that any black family, first-time home buyer, should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home. The idea that we're not doing any, we put more police on the street than any administration has. He wants to cut the cops. We're providing for equity. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history, where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water. The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate, I've not seen any indication of that. The idea that they're going to, I'm proposing that the millionaires pay 1%. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. The idea that we're talking about worse presidents, I wasn't joking.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. The idea if you lose again, you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.